can't stand the news. It's always the same old song, another corporate scam. Another story of bad gone wrong, another corporate bailout, another piece of the pie. It's the best democracy money can buy. They rig the elections, and only millionaires can play, and you gotta be cynical. You gotta look into the camera and say, I'm serving the public, when you know it's a corporate lie. But it's the best democracy money can buy. Yeah, there they go, fighting for oil, 'cause there the profits lie beneath that foreign soil. They don't know what they'll do when the wells run dry. But it's the best democracy money can buy. Life, selling our genes. They would patent oxygen if they had the means. They'll patent their drugs. Some will get you high, and it's the best democracy money can buy. They're filling the prisons, their latest industry, which lines their pockets, helps us all be free. 'Cause you gotta do something with the unemployed if they won't move to Shanghai. And it's the best democracy money can buy. We've got 2 parties, maybe someday we'll have 3. Maybe Tweedledum or Tweedledum and Tweedledee. But one thing's fairly certain, it won't be you or I, 'cause it's the best democracy money can buy. When it's finished and they finally achieve the most corporate dollarocracy that could ever be believed, the Martians will come to visit our graves, and when they go back to the sky, they'll say it was the best democracy money could buy. It was the best democracy money could buy. It was the best democracy money could buy.
Hello there, and welcome to the 3rd episode of the For All That podcasts with me, Andrew Tickell, and Michael Greenwell, both of us bloggers and now new adventurers in the land of the podcast. We've got no guest with us today due to a wee last-minute dropout, but Michael and I are just going to have a wee chat about what's been going on this week in world and Scottish politics as well.
It's actually because we smell we've got no guest.
Good. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. Yourself. I assure you I'm deeply fragrant.
No, I'm not above primary school jokes, that's all.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. But are you well, Michael?
Yeah, not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, splendid. Splendid. So maybe we can start off with what has been, particularly in I think the UK press coverage, the big political story of the week is this American election. Tuesday night. I don't know if you stayed up, did you?
No, because it was already pretty sure that Obama was going to win. So I didn't really bother to sit up. I used to, like, one of the sort of biggest party nights of my life was when the 97 election, when Labour won and the Tories were gone. And I think, how old was I? I was about 20 then. And that was...
That's the first election night that I actually remember. So.
And, when Portillo went out, it was like the winning goal in the World Cup final or something. And it was amazing. And then that kind of brilliant feeling through the Blair years, you felt so betrayed by it. So now I tend not to sit up on election night. The last one I did was actually the 2011 one in Scotland. So that one worked out quite well, even though I'm not in the SNP, as I say every time. But like, it was nice to get.
It was one of those big nights, you know. I mean, I remember that I was sitting in with my father, who'd been a kind of pro-nationalist for many years. So it was for him, you know, quite something to see many decades of failure and defeat resolving into something more cheery. And I'm sure the same is true about you in 1997, and then to a long Tory childhood that you must have had.
Yeah. So what I'm wary about with these kind of things is like the triumphalism. Because even for my part, there was a bit when Labour won that election, and then how did it work out? And I wrote an article this week about Obama, and I did it when he won the first time round, and a lot of people were very angry at me because basically I found a list of things he'd said in his campaign, and I pretended that it was John McCain that had said them, but it wasn't. It was actually Obama. And this was things like the Mexico border wall. They're not going to talk about gun control. They're not going to talk about capital punishment. Enormous hands out to companies who preach privatization of everything. Continuation of the war on terror. And I did this big list. And I said, no, that was actually Obama. Why are you people so happy? Basically just because it wasn't John McCain. And it's the same thing now. It's basically just because it's not Mitt Romney. But at the same... Sorry.
Yeah. One thing that strikes me a lot, just in line with precisely what you just said there, is Obama's sort of surprising popularity over this side of the water. And up to a point, I wonder if it is to do with primarily him not being George Bush. Obviously, that served him rather well. I know he was running against McCain 4 years ago, but that we have this kind of legacy of obviously the Blairite invasion of Iraq and so on, and so associate that with Republicans and associate that with that kind of dark period of our history. But what seems to me surprising is just, as you say, in the context of this guy who's actually quite a conservative. I mean, yes, he may have moved a bit on things like same-sex marriage, but
strictly from sorry, just to interrupt, but it's strictly from the Chicago School of Economics as well. I mean, literally from the Chicago School of Economics of all of these kind of neoliberals that people rail against. So why would you expect that he would be particularly different? I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And I suppose it seems to me one of the things I often find if you say anything slightly cynical about, say, Guantanamo Bay, say his attitude towards civil liberties. People often mention drones and their use for killing people abroad, sort of extrajudicial executions, basically. If you raise any of these questions, they would tend to say, oh, well, you know, I mean, Romney would be much worse. What about the Republicans? You wouldn't vote for the Republicans, would you? And it seems to me that is maybe a reasonable thing to think when you're standing at the ballot box and you're thinking, well, what's the least worst option? What's the lesser of two evils? But it seems to me
I always loved the expression, the evil of two lessers.
Well, yeah, I know, me too. And I think that's kind of funny, you know, people, when they don't want to engage with a debate about what people's actual policies are, whether a kind of rather right-wing Obama is someone that we ought to get very excited about, or why we suddenly have to stop thinking we have to say, oh, well, no, he's not a Republican, therefore he must be great. It seems to me that in some ways, you could argue that on certain issues, McCain being elected in 2000 and might have been better insofar as it would have produced such a polarized presidency. You know, McCain had attitudes towards, say, funding of elections and things like that, and the contribution of corporations to political campaigns, which might have been easier to get through more moderate kind of policies in this very Republican Congress. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily convincing, but it does seem to me that this kind of gulf, this sort of the binary opposition of these two folk who hold, you know, really quite similar views, and one of them is the devil incarnate, and the other one is this sort of redemptive savior figure, seems to be pretty crazy, to be honest.
Yeah, there's people on the left that believe, you know, just from what you were saying there, that Bush is gone, but Obama is just another name above the door, and the fact that he does it in a much more eloquent and calming way than Bush, who just came on and said either something stupid or something aggressive. There's a kind of an argument to say that in a way Obama's more dangerous because he's continued the policies of interventionism, rendition, any number of the worst policies of, basically, let's face it, American imperialism.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. And if you get dazzled by the veneer, I mean, certainly, we should be fair to him. I mean, in terms of some of the things about torture, that he's definitely more towards a more acceptable political position than Bush was, than the Cheneys of this life, than the John Boltons and so on. I mean, I don't want to be churlish about that, but again, it's this kind of loss of critical faculty about him, and inability to be cynical. And I think you're right, actually, that when you have a guy who seems supremely attractive, who talks all the right sort of terms, who's not a kind of vampire squid, capitalist who's going to come in, sack all the people, and entertain fond militaristic fantasies of American aggression in the world. Yeah, he may not talk the talk, but if that's what he's doing, then surely that should be what we should judge him against. But here's a counterpoint to that. One of the things which is very striking about when you watch the campaign, I thought, was the fact that this is, an elected king. This is a kind of as much a kind of spiritual, uniting national figure as it is one which delivers politics. And I think there is a tendency. I mean, think you're talking about America, which has 300 million people in it, and it all comes down to a choice between two guys. It's just sort of, as an image of politics, profoundly strange. And I think this idea that change through politics, change in the world, is affected by individual choices between two options, or one guy, Obama gets in and all is changed, is a really very pernicious image, because it's like the great men of history. I mean, what kind of historian does that kind of work these days?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like, there's an interesting kind of, I think it's cognitive dissonance is the correct word, because even from some on the left, the kind of idea, right, with it, when it was Bush, it was all Bush's fault.
Mm-hmm.
And Obama's the Pope of Hope, and he's going to sort it out. Or from some of them, from the left. But then, when Obama gets in and all these things go on, it's not his fault that all of these things continue to go on. And this is weird. This is a strange kind of double think. And I always worry when there's that kind of thing going on. Like, wait a minute, if it was all Bush's fault, then it's all Obama's fault as well. If they were Bush's bombs, then they're Obama's bombs. And I'm not sure if it's true. I'm not saying one way or another, but like, either it is Bush's fault and it's Obama's fault, or it's not Bush's fault and it's not Obama's fault. You can't have both. Like, someone left quite a good comment. He said on the article I wrote about it, which was, you could put Noam Chomsky as president and it wouldn't change that much because of the way the system's set up.
Yeah, and I think that's it seems to be, when you look at how Congress seems to function, or not function, or dysfunction, as many commentators in America seem to be thinking about it, you sort of realize how complex it is, how many interests are involved in terms of powerful lobbying groups, from the sort of military-industrial complex up almost literally to a whole gamut of people making choices. And I think what's funny is also that I think that image we get of the presidency and of the powers of the president, the influence, is buttressed by loads of different things. I mean, just take one wee example: drama. I don't know. Are you a West Wing fan, Michael?
I found it far too saccharine, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one episode which is very striking, which involved President Bartlett in China, and he's being sort of laid low by a multiple sclerosis episode, and he forces himself to enter into negotiations with the Chinese leader of the time, and through his sort of stoic intervention, struggling on through his illness and his suffering, he cut the deal and resolved some geopolitical problem, easy peasy. And at the end of the episode, he's sort of sweating in sort of physical collapse. Now that makes quite good drama. It's quite good telly. But it's a very, very misleading image of how complex processes of international politics really work out. And I really worry about that kind of image. It's sort of like Napoleon, history on horseback, isn't it? It's like sort of go back to your Hegel. And it's just really potentially quite reactionary, because it says that the solutions to political problems are individuals. And we can see that up to a point in the Scottish context too. This idea that independence is fundamentally a referendum on health examined is an outrageous, ridiculous proposition which ought to offend the sensibilities of most thinking Democrats, but it is one which is seriously promoted, mostly, it should be said, by the forces who are against Scottish independence. But this personalisation of politics, personalisation of the Constitution in Scotland, I think it's a really disempowering, negative thing myself.
Oh, no, I totally agree. It's not about one person. Never has been.
But now I suppose, and this leads on in a rather uncomfortable segue to the next topic that we have kind of etched out to discuss, which is a wee couple of interventions this week back in Scottish political terms.